You have 60 seconds to pick one, Naomi Vale said with dry amusement. The clock above the salvage yard gate dropped from 60 to 59 as Daniel Brooks walked past a 1,969 Camaro with its hood open. Men behind the auction barrier shouted at him to turn around. A stripped Corvette sat 3 cars farther down. 2 Mustangs still wore fastback rooflines beneath their dust. Daniel did not touch any of them. One choice would erase the $64,300 the failed museum owed his shop. At 43 seconds, Daniel stopped beside a battered 1,268 station wagon. Naomi raised the settlement form for every bidder to see. $64,300, and you're throwing it away on a grocery getter. Maybe the museum wasn't the only business making bad decisions. The crowd burst out laughing as Daniel placed his claim tag on lot 214. He said nothing. He had already seen the heavy-duty rear springs, 2 plugged ventilation ports, oversized battery cables, and mounting holes no family car should have needed. Then one collector stopped laughing. He turned away from the cameras, made a frantic phone call, and whispered, "Pull lot 214 from the bulk sale. Now. And don't let that mechanic touch the rear quarter trim." To everyone watching, Daniel had just traded a $64,300 claim for sun-faded junk. To understand why he took that risk, you had to understand what waiting another year would cost him. Brooks Service and Machine had maintained the Vale Motor Archive for 11 years. The archive was not owned by Naomi. It belonged to a separate non-profit museum founded by her late uncle, racing entrepreneur Conrad Vale. Naomi's company, Vale Asset Partners, managed auctions and storage for collectors. When the museum collapsed under debt, a court appointed her company to liquidate vehicles, parts, and equipment under creditor supervision. Daniel was one of the smaller creditors. His shop had rebuilt transporters, stabilized engines, and stored components during the museum's final year. The unpaid invoices totaled $64,300. That amount covered 3 months of payroll and the property tax installment due on his garage. The liquidation estate had little cash. Secured lenders stood ahead of ordinary vendors. Daniel's mechanics' liens applied to 2 engines he had worked on, but both were disputed and tied up in ownership claims. He could spend a year in court and recover a fraction. Naomi offered him a settlement approved by the creditor committee. He could take 1 vehicle from the unsorted salvage row in full satisfaction of his invoices. The selection would be made during a 60-second, no-tools inspection, because the bulk buyer's sealed bid expired that afternoon, and the estate could not allow 1 creditor hours of private access. He could open unlocked doors and the tailgate, but he could not remove trim or bolted panels, open sealed containers, or claim later that the estate guaranteed identity or provenance. Daniel's attorney called the offer reckless. The salvage row contained incomplete cars with missing titles, uncertain ownership, and years of outdoor damage. A recognizable muscle car shell might bring $20,000 or $30,000. None appeared likely to cover the full debt after transport and restoration. Daniel accepted because waiting had its own price. He was 61, a widowed father with 1 adult son, Caleb, who worked beside him but had begun interviewing with a diesel fleet. Daniel had delayed payroll twice without missing it, using his own savings and then a personal credit line. Another year of litigation would turn a museum's failure into his employees' failure. Naomi did not create that pressure. She had inherited responsibility for a chaotic estate, not its wealth. Her measurable goal was to clear the yard before storage penalties consumed what remained for creditors. Her accurate criticism of Daniel was that he had continued working for the museum after warning signs appeared because Conrad Vale had once helped his shop survive a recession. "You extended credit on a handshake after their purchasing office stopped issuing approvals," she told him during settlement negotiations. "That is not loyalty the estate can repay ahead of everyone else." Daniel knew she was right. Conrad had sent work to Brooks Service when Daniel's wife, Marie, was ill and bills were closing around them. Years later, when the museum asked Daniel to keep emergency repairs moving, he treated gratitude as authorization. He had protected an old obligation by transferring risk to his own crew. The 60-second choice was his attempt to stop doing that. The morning before the selection, Daniel and Caleb studied the estate's public lot photographs. They did not try to identify a hidden $1 million car from pixels. They ranked what could be known without opening anything: body structure, major missing parts, transport cost, title status, and signs of specialized use. The Camaro had a desirable shape but no front subframe. One Mustang carried a roof buckle that could make its structure uneconomical. The Corvette shell lacked its identifying plate and came with an ownership dispute. The wagon appeared complete except for some side glass and pieces of interior trim. Its public description read 1,968 full-size wagon, non-running, modified, no represented history. Caleb enlarged the rear stance. It sits high with flat tires. Could have replacement springs, Daniel said. The quarter vents are blocked. Could be camping equipment. They wrote every observation beside an ordinary explanation. Daniel's rule was simple. A clue remained a clue only if a less exciting answer had been considered. The thick cables were not visible in the public photographs. Daniel saw them only during the 60 seconds. Combined with the springs, vents, and floor holes, they suggested the wagon had carried heavy equipment requiring ventilation and auxiliary power. It might have been an ambulance conversion, a mobile radio car, a survey vehicle, or a race team support wagon. Any of those histories would be more coherent than a family grocery car, but coherence was not provenance. When the horn sounded, Naomi handed him the as-is settlement. The form transferred the estate's interest in Lot 214 and released his invoices. It specifically stated that the estate made no claim regarding racing history, equipment, prior use, or value. Daniel signed. His legal claim became the wagon, whatever the wagon proved to be. The collector who had stopped laughing introduced himself as Warren Pike. He was 70, broad-shouldered, and dressed less like a showman than the other bidders. Warren had assembled one of the largest private collections of Midwestern endurance racing cars. He congratulated Daniel and offered $25,000 for the wagon before it left the yard. The offer was credible. Warren said he wanted the heavy-duty rear axle for a restoration and would part out the rest. $25,000 could cover one payroll cycle and most of the tax installment without Daniel spending a dollar on transport or research. "You haven't looked underneath," Daniel said. "Neither have you. That's why the offer is clean." Naomi overheard them. "The settlement is executed. He can sell it." Daniel asked Warren to put the offer in writing. Warren did so at once, valid until the wagon crossed the yard gate. Caleb read it. "This is the safe choice." Daniel looked toward the shop crew waiting beside their rollback. They had watched him trade a fixed debt for uncertain metal. Accepting would prove he still placed certainty above curiosity when other people's paychecks were involved. Then Daniel noticed Warren's driver standing near the final bulk row. The man had placed a temporary move sticker on Lot 214, even though title had transferred to Daniel. When Caleb challenged him, the driver peeled it off and claimed a yard employee made a mistake. Daniel folded Warren's offer. "It was clean until you tried to move my car. I didn't instruct anyone to move it. Then your offer survives the gate." Warren withdrew it. "Not after you start pulling panels." That answer made Daniel's decision. He loaded the wagon. Naomi stopped the rollback at the exit. Her yard manager had discovered a database hold attached to Lot 214. The hold was not an ownership claim. It was a note entered 6 months earlier. "Retain with bulk support equipment. Do not individually catalog." The note carried the initials WP. Warren said the initials belonged to a former warehouse employee. Naomi could not assume otherwise, but she also could not ignore that her largest bulk bidder shared them. She allowed the wagon to leave because the settlement had already transferred it. Then, she froze the remaining support equipment row until the note's origin was reviewed. "You have your car," she told Daniel. "The as-is clause still controls. If you find a story, it belongs to you. If you find camping holes, those belong to you too. Fair enough. And if you damage estate material trying to create provenance, I'll challenge every claim. Also fair." The wagon arrived at Brooks Service that afternoon. Daniel parked it in the clean inspection bay rather than the repair area. He and Caleb photographed every exterior surface, underbody feature, fastener, and loose object before removing anything. They invited Naomi's estate archivist, Marlene Cho, to witness the opening of the rear quarter trim. Warren received notice and declined to attend. Daniel did not begin with the hidden panel. He began underneath. The rear spring code matched a factory heavy-duty package available for fleet and special service use. The axle ratio favored loaded highway travel rather than drag racing. Additional brackets had been welded professionally to the frame, then coated with the same aged underbody material as the surrounding floor. 2 cable channels ran from the engine compartment to the rear cargo area. A roof hole had been filled where a tall radio antenna once stood. None of those features uniquely identified a race team. Utility companies, emergency services, and survey crews used similar equipment. Inside, the cargo floor held 2 straight rows of mounting holes. Their spacing matched steel cabinet feet, but the cabinets were gone. Wear marks showed heavy cases had been slid toward the tailgate hundreds of times. Near the left wheel tub, a dark circular stain smelled faintly of old gear oil, even after decades. Marlene recorded each observation. She warned Daniel that the museum archive contained thousands of uncatalogued photographs, many without dates. If you want a fast answer, I can't give you one. I don't want a fast one. I want a traceable one. They removed the right quarter trim under continuous video. Behind it, dust lay undisturbed except where a mouse nest filled the bottom cavity. Daniel lifted the nest with a screen rather than scattering it. Beneath the paper and insulation sat a narrow oilcloth book wedged between an inner brace and the body. Marlene stopped him before he touched it. She photographed the position, measured the cavity, and placed a clean tray below. Daniel wore gloves and eased the book free without opening it. The cover had no team logo. Only the words Unit 2 were written in grease pencil. Naomi arrived before the book was unwrapped. She had authority over estate records but no ownership claim to objects inside the transferred wagon unless they had been separately scheduled as excluded property. The settlement listed no excluded contents. Her attorney confirmed that the book transferred with Lot 214, though any confidential museum information might require review before publication. Daniel allowed Marlene to stabilize the pages. The first readable entries recorded fuel drums, gear sets, radios, and engine crates. Dates ran from 1968 through 1971. Each line included a track abbreviation, a chassis number, 2 crew initials, and a mileage figure. The handwriting changed among at least 4 people. The chassis numbers corresponded to cars once campaigned by Aeroline Racing, a regionally important team founded by machinists who competed in American endurance events. Conrad Vail had purchased 2 Aeroline cars for the museum. Warren owned another. Several others had disappeared into private collections. The wagon was not listed as a race car. It was listed as Unit 2, departure rig, supply wagon, or simply blue. It carried spare engines, brake drums, fuel test equipment, and radio batteries from the team's Indiana workshop to tracks across the country. One entry noted that Unit 2 returned through a fence after avoiding a loose wheel in a paddock. Daniel checked the left rear door. Beneath 3 layers of paint sat a long, shallow crease in the same shape shown in the logbook sketch. Another entry described an antenna moved 6 inches forward after interference under a garage awning. The repaired roof hole matched that position. The book created a strong possibility. It still required independent support. A logbook found inside a vehicle could be planted, moved, or kept as a souvenir by a later owner. Daniel did not announce a discovery. He sealed the book with Marlene's preservation report and began verifying details that no single object controlled. Caleb searched factory records for the wagon's serial and build information. The car had been ordered through a fleet sales district with heavy-duty suspension, alternator, cooling, and electrical provisions. Its original color was a darker blue beneath the faded repaint. The selling dealer operated 12 miles from Aeroline Racing's workshop. Factory records did not name the first retail customer. The dealer's paper archive had been donated to a county historical society after it closed. Caleb requested the delivery ledger, but the relevant volume was missing from the digitized collection. Warren called Daniel that evening and renewed his offer at $40,000. He no longer mentioned the axle. "You know what the book connects," Daniel said. "It connects part numbers to old race cars. Books move, stories grow. I'll take the risk off your hands." Why was the wagon held out of the catalog? Warren denied entering the note. He said he had asked the museum years earlier about support vehicles because they completed displays, but nobody considered the wagon historically important. The WP initials could be coincidence. Daniel asked whether Warren had seen the wagon in an Aeroline photograph. Warren ended the call. The next pressure came from the creditor committee. News of the possible provenance spread from the yard video. 2 creditors argued that Daniel had received an asset materially more valuable than the $64,000 claim, making the settlement unfair to the estate. They demanded that Naomi rescind the transfer or share any upside. The settlement was final and as is in both directions. If Daniel had chosen a worthless shell, no creditor would restore his invoices. Naomi's attorney said value discovered after a fair selection did not normally undo the bargain. But if a bidder or estate agent had intentionally suppressed known provenance, the liquidation process could be challenged. Naomi suspended final distribution and opened an internal review. Daniel's wagon remained his, but any public sale or restoration could complicate the inquiry. His quick path to cash disappeared again. At the garage, payroll came due Friday. Daniel had enough in the account to pay employees or the property tax installment, not both. He considered taking Warren's $40,000 offer, while title remained clear. Caleb found him at the workbench with the offer beside the payroll ledger. "You said the safe choice changed at the gate. The crew didn't agree to finance a history project. Neither did you. Sell it if that's the responsible thing. Just don't call it protecting the car if you're really protecting the shop." Daniel looked at his son. Caleb was 32, old enough to leave without permission, and young enough to build a career elsewhere. He had stayed through Marie's illness, museum emergencies, and 2 delayed paydays. Daniel had assumed that shared sacrifice meant shared desire. "The fleet job called again," Caleb said. "They want an answer Monday." Daniel asked what he wanted. "I want a place where every old favor doesn't become my emergency." The words did not accuse Conrad or the wagon. They accused Daniel's habit of turning legacy into debt. If he sold the wagon to preserve the exact shop that exhausted his son, the victory would repeat the problem. Daniel chose a more expensive course. He paid the employees on time, requested a formal property tax installment plan, and stopped all unpaid provenance work after 5 that evening. Verification would continue only during hours funded by a small historical research grant Marlene identified, or by Daniel's own recorded contribution. Caleb would owe the wagon nothing. He also told Caleb to accept the fleet interview. "I'm not pushing you out," Daniel said. "I'm taking my hand off the door." Caleb did not answer then. He went home at 5:30, the earliest he had left on a weekday in months. The next morning, Marlene found the missing dealer ledger. It had been cataloged under commercial accounts rather than vehicle sales. The page for the wagon listed Aeroline Fabrication Company as purchaser and identified a special delivery instruction. "Rear cabinets supplied by customer. Send to body contractor after dealer preparation." The body contractor still existed as a truck equipment company under a new name. Its retired foreman, Arthur Keene, was 86 and lived nearby. Daniel did not bring Arthur to the garage for a theatrical reveal. Marlene interviewed him at home with his daughter present and showed him photographs without suggesting an answer. Arthur recognized the cabinet pattern and ventilation layout as work his shop performed for radio and track support vehicles. He did not remember this wagon specifically. His old estimate books, stored with the company archive, contained a 1,968 job for Aeroline, 2 steel cabinets, ventilated battery enclosure, tie-down rails, work light, radio shelf, and removable engine cradle anchors. The bolt spacing on the estimate drawing matched Daniel's cargo floor. The drawing showed a small triangular notch cut in the right cabinet foot to clear a factory seam. A rust shadow on the wagon floor preserved the same notch. That was the first independent physical match between the vehicle and a dated Aeroline document. Naomi asked the creditor committee to keep the settlement intact while her review continued. She explained that the wagon's possible significance arose from information available to anyone who inspected the exterior clues during the same 60-second process. The committee disagreed about fairness, but accepted that rescinding only a successful choice would make as-is settlements meaningless. One creditor raised the harder issue. Had Warren manipulated the catalog to keep the wagon in the bulk lot? If so, other assets might also have been suppressed, and the estate's entire sale process required review. Naomi traced the database hold. The user account belonged to a former contract cataloger named Wesley Parks. The initials WP were his. Warren appeared cleared. Then Wesley produced the email that caused him to enter it. Warren had sent a photograph of the wagon to Naomi's yard manager months earlier and written, "Keep the old support cars together. No need to spend catalog money on individual junk." Wesley copied the instruction into the database under his own initials. Warren had not accessed the system or forged a hold. He had influenced classification while preparing a sealed bulk bid that included the same vehicles. The conflict had never been disclosed to Naomi. Warren defended himself. He said support cars were generally low value and that grouping them reduced estate cost. His bid was competitive. He had not stated the wagon lacked history. The catalog correctly made no representation. That defense was not absurd. Support vehicles often sold for modest sums. Historical importance did not guarantee a high price, and Warren's interest in completing a display could explain his offer without proving misconduct. Naomi gave him a chance to correct course. He could withdraw his bulk bid, disclose every estate vehicle he had previously researched, and participate in a new, transparent sale process. In exchange, she would report the conflict as corrected before award, rather than intentional bid manipulation. Warren refused. "You're letting a mechanic turn bolt holes into a scandal." "I'm letting your undisclosed email turn into a disclosed email," Naomi said. "The bolt holes can wait for authentication." She canceled the final bulk award under the conflict clause and reopened the support equipment lots after independent catalog review. That decision cost the estate 2 weeks of storage and exposed Naomi to criticism from secured creditors. It also prevented Warren from acquiring the rest of the Aeroline material under a classification he had helped shape. Warren retaliated by challenging Daniel's logbook. He hired a document consultant who noted that 2 entries used ballpoint ink formulations common in the late 1970s, years after the recorded races. Online posts declared the book fake. Daniel read the consultant's report instead of attacking it. The ink finding was real. The late entries appeared on pages summarizing earlier trips and could have been copied years later. If the entire book had been created as memorabilia, its presence in the wagon would not prove contemporary use. Marlene separated the pages by ink, paper, handwriting, and physical wear. Earlier entries used pencil and period inks. Later summaries used ballpoint and referenced the sale of equipment after Aeroline closed. The book was not a single-time artifact. It had remained in use as an inventory record. That complicated history made it more credible, not less, but only if external facts matched both periods. Caleb, working on his own time after accepting the fleet job, searched regional newspapers and race programs. 1,978 classified advertisement offered former Aeroline shop equipment and Blue Parts wagon, cabinets removed. The contact number belonged to a crew chief named Frank Deller. Frank had died, but his daughter preserved 35mm slides from the team. She allowed Marlene to scan them under a written agreement. 3 showed the blue wagon in paddocks between 1969 and 1971. The images were not dramatic. The wagon sat behind race cars with its tailgate down while mechanics unloaded gear. One slide showed the repaired crease on the left rear door. Another showed the antenna after it had moved forward. A third showed the right rear quarter with 2 open ventilation holes and a hand-painted Aeroline wing emblem above them. Daniel compared the emblem position to the wagon. Paint depth readings showed extra layers in the same rectangular area. Under controlled abrasion performed by a conservation specialist, a narrow piece of the old cream-colored wing appeared beneath the blue topcoat. The specialist stopped after revealing only enough to compare shape and pigment. Daniel refused to strip the full logo for a camera. "Restoration can destroy proof faster than neglect," he told Naomi. The slides, dealer ledger, body contractor drawing, spring code, cabinet foot shadow, antenna repair, door crease, paint layer, and logbook entries formed a chain. No single item carried the story. Together, they established that Lot 214 had served Aeroline Racing as a factory-ordered support wagon and mobile equipment carrier. Its importance went beyond owning a team logo. The logbook linked service dates, engine movements, and component changes across at least 6 Aeroline race car chassis. 2 cars had disputed histories. One museum claimed its engine failed at a 1970 event and was replaced. The wagon record showed the damaged engine transported home, rebuilt, and later installed in a different chassis. That information could correct multiple provenance files. Warren owned the second chassis. If the wagon record were accepted, one of his cars would lose a claim to its original engine while gaining a documented period replacement. The car would remain significant, but a headline description in his private catalog would require correction. His motive was no longer simply to buy a support wagon cheaply. He wanted control of a record capable of changing the histories of cars already inside his collection. Warren made Daniel a final offer. $300,000 for the wagon, the physical logbook, Daniel's research files, and every reproduction Daniel legally controlled. The agreement required Daniel to describe the logbook's vehicle references as unverified research notes and prohibited him from publishing or sharing his copies without Warren's approval. $300,000 would pay the taxes, clear Daniel's credit line, replace the shop roof, and fund every employee benefit he had cut. It was more cash than Brooks' service had earned in some full years. The offer did not require Daniel to lie about the wagon. It required him to let one interested collector control how the record affected other vehicles. Naomi could not tell him what to do. The wagon and book belonged to him. Marlene said an archive or museum might eventually acquire the material, but no institution had approved funds close to Warren's offer. Preservation ethics did not pay Daniel's payroll. Caleb came to the shop after his first day with the fleet company. He wore a clean Navy uniform and looked uncomfortable in it. Daniel handed him the offer. "This solves every shop problem I gave you. It solves them if the shop is the only thing that matters. I'm not asking you to stay. I know. That's why I can answer honestly. Sell the car if the buyer can own the metal. Don't sell him the right to decide what happened to everyone else's work." Daniel asked Warren to separate the offer. One price for the wagon, a second for physical custody of the logbook subject to public archival access. No exclusive control over factual vehicle records. Warren refused. Without information control, the wagon alone was not worth the number. Daniel rejected the offer. The decision cost him immediately. The tax office approved an installment plan with interest and a lien that would remain until paid. Daniel sold a modern enclosed trailer he used only a few times a year and reduced his own draw. He did not make the crew finance his principal. The historical research grant covered document stabilization, while ordinary shop revenue carried ordinary expenses. Naomi scheduled a public provenance review before relisting the support lots. The setting was the museum's former service hall, not a stage built for applause. Representatives of the creditor committee, auction bidders, historians, insurers, and owners of affected Aeroline cars attended. Warren participated with counsel. Daniel presented the evidence in the order it had been found. Exterior clues justified selection but proved no identity. Factory and dealer records tied the wagon to Aeroline. The contractor drawing matched the physical floor. Period slides matched damage, antenna, vents, and paint. The logbook connected trips and parts, while its later ink showed continued inventory use rather than a perfectly frozen artifact. Warren's consultant repeated the limitation. Not every entry was contemporary, and handwritten chassis numbers could contain copying errors. Daniel agreed. He proposed that no owner change a vehicle description from the logbook alone. Each affected claim required its own corroboration. That concession prevented the review from becoming a treasure proclamation. It also removed Warren's strongest argument that Daniel was inflating every note for value. The owner of an Aeroline coupe presented an old engine rebuild invoice, bearing the same date and crew initials as a wagon entry. Another owner had a customs transport form showing one listed gearbox traveled with Unit 2. Independent documents began confirming specific lines. Warren then faced the question that mattered to the liquidation. Had he known the wagon's likely identity before advising that support vehicles remain uncatalogued? He admitted seeing one of Frank Deller's slides years earlier. He said he believed the wagon might be the Aeroline support car but considered the connection too weak to justify catalog expense. He had planned to research it after buying the bulk lot. Naomi asked why he offered Daniel $25,000 within minutes of the selection. Because the axle and fleet equipment had value. And $40,000 after the logbook appeared? Warren looked toward his attorney. Because uncertainty had value too. The creditor committee did not accuse him of theft. It disqualified his bulk bid for an undisclosed material conflict and barred him from acting as both catalog advisor and bidder in the renewed sale. The committee ordered independent review of every lot his email had helped classify. Those were consequences the auction agreement authorized. Naomi issued a corrected catalog. It described the wagon as an authenticated Aeroline racing support vehicle with an evolving evidence file, not an original race car or priceless one-of-one artifact. It listed known alterations, missing cabinets, non-running condition, and the mixed date logbook. The report credited Arthur Keene's body contractor archive, Frank Deller's family slides, Marlene's research, Caleb's document work, and the mechanics whose initials appeared in the book. She also amended Vail Asset Partners' policy. Anyone providing classification advice had to disclose current and intended bidding interests. Uncatalogued did not mean unreviewed. Support vehicles, transporters, timing equipment, and crew archives would receive the same conflict check as headline cars. The policy change did not erase Naomi's own role. During the next creditor meeting, A secured lender asked why her yard manager had accepted Warren's classification advice without a conflict form. Naomi could have blamed Wesley Parks, the contract cataloger whose initials appeared on the hold. Instead, she produced the email chain. Her yard manager had forwarded Warren's instruction to Wesley with the words, "He knows this material better than we do." Naomi had approved the bulk sales schedule without reviewing who supplied the grouping. The creditor committee reduced Vail Asset Partners' management fee by the additional storage cost caused by reopening the sale. It also required an outside monitor for the final lot review. Naomi accepted both conditions. She kept the liquidation assignment because replacing the company mid-process would cost the estate more, but her profit no longer sat untouched beside everyone else's loss. Daniel respected that consequence more than an apology. He had spent years around owners who treated responsibility as a sentence spoken after the invoice went somewhere else. Naomi's company paid for the correction it needed. Warren appealed his bid disqualification through the sales dispute procedure. His attorney argued that the email expressed only a catalog opinion, and that Warren had no duty to disclose interest before formal bidder registration. The estate rules, however, required any consultant with non-public lot access to disclose a possible purchase interest. Warren had toured the support row with Naomi's yard manager before the public preview and later submitted the bulk bid through an affiliated company. Warren argued that Daniel had benefited from the same sparse catalog. With proper research, lot 214 might have been priced beyond his claim. Daniel agreed. "The question isn't whether I got lucky. It's whether a bidder helped decide what the estate wouldn't examine." The reviewer upheld the bulk bid disqualification, but allowed Warren to compete on fully cataloged individual lots. He won 2 parts lots and lost the support equipment group. The result confirmed that the assets had been underexplained, not hidden treasure worth endless money. The families of former Aeroline crew members complicated the Wagon history further. After the public review, Marlene received letters, photographs, and contradictory memories. One mechanic's son insisted Unit 2 was a darker 1967 model. A former driver remembered the Wagon as green. Another crew member said the team owned 2 blue wagons at different times. Daniel did not dismiss them. Memory could preserve meaning while changing color and year. The logbook itself said Unit 2, implying a Unit 1. If the exhibit claimed every story belonged to Lot 214, it would repeat the same overconfidence that put false originality in auction catalogs. Marlene organized an identification day. She displayed photographs without captions and asked participants to mark only what they personally remembered, what they had heard from others, and what a document established. The categories remained separate. Arthur Keene's estimate identified 1 wagon by job number. Dealer records identified Daniel's serial. Slides matched its physical damage. Oral memories supplied daily functions and names but were not used alone to establish vehicle identity. An 80-year-old former tire man named Leon Price recognized the grease pencil phrase Unit 2. He explained that Unit 1 was the team's enclosed truck, not another wagon. The truck carried the primary race car and heavy machine tools. The wagon carried urgent spares, radios, food, and whichever mechanic needed to leave late or return early. If Unit 1 broke, the whole team stopped, Leon said. If Unit 2 broke, we fixed it before anybody noticed. He remembered sleeping in the wagon outside a transmission shop while waiting for a gear set. He remembered using the dual batteries to power a radio relay during a storm-delayed event. He did not remember chassis numbers. His account explained the equipment but did not authenticate the logbook. Leon brought 1 item, a small photograph of 5 crew members leaning against the tailgate. The wagon's license plate was readable. A state motor vehicle archive, accessed under historical research rules, connected the plate to the same serial number Daniel owned. The photograph also showed a rectangular patch of darker paint where a damaged team logo had been touched up, supporting the layered paint finding. The image changed the emotional center of the project. 2 men in it had no surviving family listed. One was identified in the logbook only as RJ. The other appeared in payroll sheets as Ellis, with no first name. Marlene refused to label them unknown mechanic number 1 and 2. She created an open research field and asked visitors to submit evidence, not guesses. Caleb found RJ through a union newsletter. Robert James Klein had been a machinist at Aeroline's sponsor plant and joined the weekend crew. His granddaughter lived in Wisconsin and possessed his service patches and timesheets. Ellis remained unresolved. Daniel realized the wagon did not merely connect expensive chassis. It connected workers who disappeared when histories followed only owners and drivers. That strengthened his refusal to sell information control, but it also created a new duty. If the record became public, families deserved privacy choices around addresses, medical notes, and personal entries in the logbook. Caleb designed an access copy that redacted private phone numbers, addresses, and one medical entry, while preserving parts movements and work credits. The unredacted original stayed in controlled archival storage. Each redaction was logged so future researchers knew information existed without being entitled to see it. Warren objected that selective access reduced scholarly value. Marlene invited him to propose a privacy policy through the same review channel as everyone else. He submitted useful suggestions on reproducing fragile pages and distinguishing original entries from later summaries. The project accepted those suggestions and credited him. Daniel did not enjoy giving Warren credit. That was why he knew it mattered. A man could have a conflict, make a self-serving decision, and still contribute expertise. Accountability did not require erasing every useful thing he knew. The museum loan nearly failed over restoration. Its exhibit designer wanted the wagon repainted in Aeroline blue with a complete wing emblem. A polished vehicle would photograph better and draw attention across the hall. The donor committee offered extra funds if the wagon could appear, as it did on race day. Daniel asked which race day. Slides showed dents appearing, cabinets changing, antenna positions moving, and paint fading across 4 seasons. No single condition represented its entire service life. The designer proposed a cosmetic restoration to the earliest documented configuration. Daniel refused to authorize it under the preservation loan. Repainting would remove layered evidence and turn a working support vehicle into a modern guess. Naomi surprised him by siding with the museum. "People have to understand what they're looking at from 20 feet away," she said. "A faded wagon beside bright race cars looks like storage." "It was storage," Daniel answered. "Storage that moved. Then make that visible." The argument lasted 3 meetings. Daniel's ownership gave him veto power, but using it without an alternative would make preservation a private preference. Caleb proposed a reversible solution. The museum would project a low-intensity outline of the original Aeroline wing onto the faded quarter panel at scheduled times. Visitors could see the documented logo position without new paint touching old evidence. A nearby screen would slide between dated photographs, showing how the wagon changed in service. For the cargo area, Caleb proposed reproduction cabinets based on Arthur's drawings, mounted through the existing holes with protective sleeves. Every new piece would carry a discrete brass plate stating reproduction 2026. Original wear shadows would remain visible beneath clear, removable panels. The exhibit could explain both historical function and modern reconstruction. The donor committee accepted the compromise. Naomi admitted it communicated more than a glossy restoration would have. Daniel admitted the wagon needed interpretation to avoid looking like neglect. That exchange changed the way they worked together. Naomi stopped treating presentation as a threat to truth. Daniel stopped treating every presentational choice as dishonesty. The boundary became reversibility and disclosure. The project remained financially difficult. The tax plan charged interest, and museum payments followed milestones rather than emergencies. When one payment arrived late, Daniel sold his restored motorcycle to cover payroll. Caleb objected, but Daniel would not make the crew finance a contract he had chosen. Losing the motorcycle hurt. Learning that Marie's memory did not live in every shared object helped. The first museum payment went into a restricted project account. Research and conservation came from that account. Ordinary shop bills came from customers. Caleb kept the fleet job but began planning a separate fabrication company that might contract with Brooks Service. Daniel did not turn the idea into an inheritance plan. "Build it because customers need it," he said, "not because my sign needs your name." The wagon was not sold. Daniel established a preservation loan with the Midwest Transportation Museum, a public institution with climate-controlled space, and an exhibit program. He retained ownership for 3 years while the museum funded stabilization and made the records available to verified researchers. At the end of the term, the museum held an option to purchase at an independently appraised price, with grants and donor funds, rather than a dramatic blank check. The appraisal valued the wagon as a historically important team support artifact, but far below Warren's control premium. Daniel accepted that. The highest offer had priced silence, not just metal. Brooks Service received modest loan income and a contract to conserve the mechanical systems without over-restoring the body. Daniel rebuilt the brakes, stabilized the engine, and made the wagon safely movable. He preserved the faded paint, door crease, cabinet shadows, and small revealed section of the wing emblem. New parts were marked in the conservation log. Caleb kept the fleet job. For the first time, father and son worked together because a project interested them, not because the garage schedule demanded it. Caleb came on Saturdays to build removable reproductions of the cargo cabinets from Arthur's drawing. He used new steel stamped discreetly with the year, so no future owner could mistake the reproductions for original equipment. The logbook led to corrections in 3 Aeroline vehicle histories. One collector lost an original engine claim and threatened legal action, then withdrew after his own archived invoice confirmed the swap. Another discovered that a gearbox long dismissed as incorrect had been installed by the team during the period. The records did not make every car more valuable. They made the descriptions more accurate. Naomi visited the museum during exhibit installation. The former salvage rows Mustangs and Camaro had sold in the renewed auction, some for more than expected and some for less. The incomplete Corvette remained in litigation because its ownership defect had not disappeared through excitement. The estate paid Daniel nothing beyond the wagon settlement. Fairness ran both directions. "Do you regret giving him 60 seconds?" Marlene asked Naomi. "I regret thinking speed made the process equal," she said. "It only made hidden preparation more valuable." Future creditor selections used a common preview period and conflict disclosures. The auction could still move efficiently without turning limited inspection into entertainment. The exhibit opened without positioning the wagon as the star that secretly won every race. The race cars occupied the bright center floor. Daniel's wagon stood along the service wall with its tailgate open. Inside were reproduced cabinets, radios, tools, shipping forms, and a digital copy of the logbook. A map traced the miles driven between the Aeroline workshop and each track. The largest panel did not list auction values. It named the mechanics, drivers, fabricators, transport hands, and family members who kept records. Some names remained unknown, represented by the initials they left in grease pencil. Daniel brought his crew on a Monday when the museum was closed to the public. Luis found his grandfather's surname in a payroll photograph from another team and stood before it longer than he expected. Caleb tested the cabinet latches. Naomi placed the corrected estate catalog in a display drawer beside Warren's disclosed email, both documents presented without theatrical labels. At the end of the service wall, the station wagon's rear suspension was visible in a mirror beneath the chassis. Visitors could see the heavy spring pack Daniel counted during the first seconds. Small lights marked the plugged vent holes, cable route, antenna repair, cabinet foot notch, and preserved door crease. Marlene asked Daniel to place the original numbered claim tag in the exhibit. It was the small paper tag he had slipped beneath the windshield wiper with 3 seconds left. Daniel declined. The tag had transferred ownership, but it had not created the wagon's history. He mounted it instead on the old payroll board at Brooks Service, beside the property tax schedule and the crew's current time cards. It reminded him that a clever choice did not excuse careless obligations. For the exhibit, the conservators placed a period-correct yellow grease pencil from the museum's teaching collection beside a facsimile of the Unit 2 cover. The label made clear that the pencil was interpretive, not an artifact recovered from the wagon, and explained how ordinary shop tools preserved working records. On opening day, families walked past the polished race cars and gathered at the wagon's tailgate. Children slid digital drawers across the exhibit screen to see what each cabinet carried. Older men pointed out the radio shelf, oil stains, and tie-downs they recognized from their own years around tracks and service crews. Daniel stayed near the back. He did not own the driver's victories, and he had not discovered a magic fortune. He had noticed that the least glamorous vehicle in the yard had been built for work, then refused to let one buyer own the meaning of that work. Caleb joined him after his fleet shift, still wearing the Navy uniform. "The new cabinets are holding up," he said. "They've carried no engines. Give the kids time." They watched a museum technician close the tailgate at the end of the day. Through the glass, the reproduced cabinets aligned with the old mounting holes. Above them, the map showed thousands of road miles traveled behind cars whose names filled record books. Back at Brooks Service, Daniel made the week's payroll, paid the first tax installment, and shut the office without checking for emergency messages from the museum. Caleb had his own job. The wagon had its own public purpose. The garage no longer needed every piece of history to belong to it. Before turning out the lights, Daniel looked at the claim tag on the payroll board. 60 seconds had not saved his business. The choices after those 60 seconds had changed how he ran it. He drew one line beneath the current time cards, wrote PAID with the same kind of yellow grease pencil his father had used for decades, and left the tag where a working obligation, not a winning car, would be the first thing he saw Monday morning.